At any point in your life and through regular points in your life, it's worthwhile to reflect on, what do I deeply desire? And just notice if that is different than what you're going after, how you're spending your time and your energy and your money and your resources. And get that clear knowing of what it is that you deeply desire, not just from an intellectual standpoint of knowing the words, but a feeling of that desire.
Your host, Shah Hurley. Each week, I invite a conscious leader in tech, sales, and beyond to share their inner journey, how they overcome obstacles, how they achieve success while staying true to themselves, and above all, what makes them human beings. I hope those authentic conversations serve as an inspiration for you as you continue your own inner journey of self-discovery, healing, and mastery. Hi, Ivy.
Hello.
Hello. I'm so happy and excited for this conversation. Recently, I was reading this book called The Real Love, and one of the exercises was actually to reflect what are the role models that we have in our life. And then I was going back to my journal. I realized you're one of my top role models. When I was very burned out working on Google, I think it was 7 years ago. It was a long time ago. I didn't realize how much influence you had on me till now, looking back. And then so I thought I would reach out to you and have a conversation and maybe reflect and have you to share some of the wisdoms, and especially for other women who are going through some challenging times, either with jobs, relationships, or health, because I think they're all interconnected in a way. I remember I look at your Instagram post, one of them, you're sharing your photos from 10 years ago. You look like a different person back then. So maybe just start with, who you are back then 10 years ago, or maybe even go further if you wanted to, your childhood.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation. It's been so beautiful to know you and see your transformation over these years. I'm a daughter of immigrants. My parents immigrated to the US from Taiwan, and I grew up in the suburbs on the East Coast. And I think with a lot of immigrant families, I was raised with this notion of having to really survive and make it in America. And my Asian immigrant parents had an idea of what they thought would be best for me, what they thought would allow me to have a life of happiness and ease and not suffer. So I went to college in New York City, and I worked in corporate for some time. I worked in investment banking, but I was so drained and unhappy. And there was a part of me that was really confused because I had followed the path of getting a good education, of getting a good job, of having this dream career, working in banking and being able to pay my bills. But I was deeply, really stressed and really unhappy. I had all sorts of physical health issues. Emotionally, I was struggling. And there was a part of me that knew this was not the way, that money wasn't everything. And if I was making, pretty good money for someone who just graduated from college, and seeing so many people around me who made hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and were deeply unhappy, it made me think about what are other possibilities. And so meanwhile, ever since I was young, I was really interested in all different healing modalities. I started studying yoga from the age of 15 before it got really popular in the US. Because of struggles I had in my childhood, I was deeply studying Buddhism, Taoism, all sorts of spiritual philosophies. And during the time I was working in corporate, I was taking classes and workshops and traveling the world, studying with different master teachers of all different modalities, just as a hobby for my own interest. and to try to help myself with my spiritual struggles and with my health. And over time, through my new career in corporate, I came to realize that I was deeply passionate and had a gift for healing, in particular for Chinese medicine. And I had a lot of fear about going that route as a career path because of all the immigrant programming, right? About financial stability, about climbing the corporate ladder, of having this notion of success from the immigrant perspective. And I had a lot of fear about being an entrepreneur, about being a practitioner, about going down the path of healing. And I remember when I told my parents that I quit my job. At the time I was working in tech in the San Francisco. When I told them that I quit my job, they were so unhappy. They were like, everything we sacrificed in coming to the US, you're throwing down the drain, and you're going backwards pursuing Chinese medicine when, this world is modernizing with Western medicine. And it was a moment where it really strengthened my conviction and my knowing of my own truth that this was my path. And it was a point of complete surrender, because I didn't know what the plan was. And I didn't have that ability to rationalize and calculate if it would be successful in some way. I just had a really strong knowing within my spirit that this was the right path for me, that there were gifts in my soul that I was meant to discover more of and to contribute to this world in some way. So 2014, I went to get my master's degree in Chinese medicine. So it was a 4-year process. And then after that, I opened my practice. And I had the vision of sharing about Chinese medicine in the way that I knew from my family and from my culture, which was really about seeing the interconnection of the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And at the time, I didn't know how this would land, because amongst even the Chinese medicine practitioners that I knew that were practicing with more of an American community, it was very slanted towards biomedical. But from my own experience and from my family, I knew that so much of the potency and the meaning and effectiveness of Chinese medicine was in understanding how the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual parts of our health and parts of our life were deeply intertwined. So that was my vision when I started my practice many years ago. And luckily it all worked out. So here I am today. And I have a beautiful wellness center in Berkeley, in the Kensington neighborhood, where I practice acupuncture there and have a whole team of wonderful practitioners of all different healing modalities.
That was such a journey. Just as you were telling the story, I just started envisioning like you having those conversations with your parents, because it can be difficult to have those real conversations with our parents. It's easy to avoid. Can you share your relationship with your parents, like how it changed or evolved over the time as you step into this, this whole almost like a soul journey?
Sure. So my parents and I had a really difficult relationship when I was younger. And I think that was largely in part because they had certain ideas of what they thought was best for me. And I had a very different rebellious spirit. And we clashed at many times. We clashed about cultural differences. And we argued a lot. But there was a deep love that I understood beneath it all. And I think that as I grew older, I grew to understand that the reason why we argued so much was because they deeply cared for me. And despite our differences, they really wanted me to be well. So over time, it took a lot of work, both with myself and thankfully with my mother especially. And we came to more of an understanding and more of a harmony. Whereas now I'm able to have a lot more understanding of where she comes from, why she has the perspective that she has, and have compassion for what she has gone through, the struggles that she has gone through, and how those fears and how those pains have affected the way that she mothers me. And I think having that perspective and that compassion has been able to help me have a forgiveness for the ways that I had felt hurt or misunderstood or not supported when I was younger, and be able to meet her in a place where, despite our differences, there's the intention to find connection and to find harmony and still find a way to share the love and the presence in each other's life. So I'm really grateful for that, because now I'm able to truly welcome her into my home so that she can spend time with not just me, but also my daughter, and really build a relationship with my daughter.
Oh, wow. I got goosebumps. I'm just so happy to hear that. This whole healing work on yourself, how does that affect your motherhood? Like, raising your child. I'm sure there are times that your daughter show up in a way kind of reminds you of yourself when you were younger. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a mother yet, but I heard a lot of stories about that. Um, yeah, anything you feel, comfortable sharing, I'm curious.
Yeah, as you know, a lot of my work is with fertility,
Yes.
pregnancy, postpartum. And it's funny because sometimes I'll get people who come to me who have been struggling with fertility for a while. They've been trying to conceive, maybe they've had miscarriages, maybe they've had failed IVF cycles. And I find that oftentimes people have this notion where they want to get pregnant, they want to bring a baby into this world, yet there isn't a full willingness to change your life. And this expectation that your life is going to be the same with just a baby dropped into the picture is totally false. Because when you bring another soul into your life, into your family, everything is going to change. And I think oftentimes we have this notion of wanting to have a baby to teach them things, to pass on things, to pass on a legacy. But really, the babies, these children, are teaching us.
Mm.
They're such pure light souls that come onto this earth, and they reflect so much back to us of what we haven't healed yet, especially related to our own childhood.
Mm.
And they reveal to us what true, innocent, pure love really is. So shifted with my mother was when I acknowledged her humanness. I acknowledged that she's not just a mother, she's a person, and she has her own life experiences. She has her own struggles, her own that have formed her perspectives and her ways of loving that, may have not been what I needed. But it still didn't minimize the fact that she truly loved, but perhaps she was not able to express it in certain ways, or it was distorted in certain things she said or certain things that she did. And I think that helped me to not be so reactive to her or so judgmental of her, and instead just see her as a human going through her own journey, and interact with her from that way.
Kind of goes down to forgiveness without saying forgiveness. It's like nowadays there's a lot of like healing modality, like affirmation, say, I forgive you, but that's very on the surface level, right? Like I do remember there are sessions I have with you. You're like, you have to feel it, like do not rationalize. You have to feel in your body. And I remember the beginning of this year, I had this intention to really feel all the things that I did not give myself permission to feel, and it gets really hard. And then there's a moment I was like, oh, Sha, like there's a reason why you didn't want to feel it because it was so difficult. It hurt so much. And but once the feeling, certain feelings pass, and it was just so beautiful. And like it's almost like, yeah, I feel this amount of suffering, sadness, anger, and then at the same time I feel this amount of joy and everything, and then it just gets expand. With your mother, you being healing as you get into your own motherhood, I'm curious about your marriage. I don't feel like you talk a lot about your marriage, but I'm just curious because that's, there has to be a father for this whole baby to grow in a more complete way. How does that change or shifted?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the first is that when you have a baby, it is so hard and challenging at times just to keep this newborn baby alive. And I think going through that experience gives you so much reverence for your mother and for all mothers, no matter what they said or did that may have been messed up. They put so much love to just keeping you alive that you know that love was there. Um, and I think with babies, they come in with their own blueprint. They have the lineage of both the mother and the father. And it's really interesting to know that and to really see them as their own unique being. They're not your mini me. They are truly their own unique being. And nowadays we are raising kids in so much of a different way than we did generations ago for hundreds, thousands of years. We're very much in these nuclear, rather isolated families instead of being in a village where in the same house or in the same neighborhood, in the same village, we're around so many other aunts and uncles, grandmas, grandfathers, cousins, adults, and kids. Right now, we're more isolated, and I find that the fathers play a very big role in raising children and in the household than they did even just a generation ago. So of course, I think that becoming a parent shifts everything, who you are, and of course with your relationship as well. And gosh, it's very dynamic. I think that, as you change, like your relationship changes as well. And I think that it's an opportunity for two people to find ways to come even closer in that process. A lot of struggles come when two people are changing, but changing in very different ways. And there isn't that communication and the connection so that the evolution can be done together, for the whole family. So I don't talk about my relationship much because I find that I think I'm just a private person, but also there isn't room on the internet and social media to get to the complexities of relationship. I think especially with the world of social media now, we're often bombarded with these images of happy couples and life is so great. And so when we've argued with our partner or we're going through something, we feel like we're the only one. And we feel like, what's wrong with my relationship?
Yeah.
But when I talk to elders who have, been in a relationship for a long time, a lot of their strength comes through the struggle and that commitment to get through the struggle together and to get through it so that there can be more strength and more closeness in the relationship. And having a child, in the environment that we live in these days with the social the social struggles that are happening these days, there's a lot of challenge there. And it is challenging us even more to come back to a place of love, of what is truly important at the essence. And if we make a commitment to our partner to be parents for a child, it's a huge surrender of the ego of like, let me use this opportunity for my own healing to get out of a reactive pattern and really think about what is in the best interest of my child instead of what is in the best interest of my ego. So in a way, having a child really catalyzes your own growth. And with that shifts your relationship with your partner, but with everyone that's in your life.
Wow. Yeah, it comes back to love, right? It's the relationship you have with your mother and your partner and your child. It all comes back to love. I feel like there's so much trust in the process of taking actions and communicating, when grounded in love. And I remember one of the conversations you and I had was about love. I don't recall the whole conversation, but I do remember that intention of moving from fear to love. Because when we're in fear, our mind can basically take us to a different direction. And when we're communicating from the intention of love, and then things just shifted. I noticed how my feeling and the communication words come out of my mouth is so different than when I was in fear.
I feel that a lot of us women who were raised to succeed academically and then succeed professionally, we were conditioned to be very cognitive and very rational, very intellectual, very analytical, very much in our mind, in our thoughts. And especially from an Asian culture where the emotions are not really talked about or displayed, even more so we're like in our thoughts. It was by fortune that I'm a very deeply feeling person. And I think that, throughout my life, there were instances where I just had a feeling that was so strong. This feeling of my intuition, of something that I just knew I had to do that didn't quite make the most rational sense if you looked at it from a certain argument. But I just had this feeling that my spirit wanted to do it. And I always had this question that I posed to myself of what's the worst that could happen, right? Like if I move to this place, if it doesn't work out, what's the worst that could happen? I just move back to where I was originally living, right? And so over the years, I came to see that each time I made that leap of faith and I listened to my intuition and I made that choice, it felt good to me. Even if it didn't work out perfectly, I was able to learn what I needed to learn. I was able to get more clarity about things. I was able to discover more about myself and what I wanted and I needed. So each time I made that choice, it started to build up more courage. So the fear wasn't so overwhelming. Not that the fear completely went away. I think that whenever you're facing something that is unknown, there's a degree of fear there, but it wasn't so loud. And instead, it became more of an exploration from a spiritual perspective of what is my soul here for in this lifetime? And I'm someone who I'm like I used to live in New York, so I'm kind of like work hard, play hard. I want to explore all of what this lifetime has to offer me. And I think that really drove a lot of my decisions on things, especially when it wasn't a conventional path. And over time, I came to see that only you know what is best for you, because you can make arguments either way, pros or cons. But ultimately, what is the decision going to be? It doesn't come from an analytical, rational place. It really comes from a knowing in your gut, a knowing in your heart that this is what I'm inclined to do. And I feel that way, especially when it comes to relationships, because we tend to get caught up in our mind, spinning stories on things, spinning judgments, getting caught in loops about what someone said or what we read in this post. But really it comes down to like, what is my feeling? Even though there's all these thoughts that could be telling me otherwise, what is my feeling? And I feel that this life is so precious that if there's that feeling of love that's there, it's worthwhile to explore that.
Yeah, it is the whole way of making decisions. It sounds like it's more like seeing life, making life decisions as exploration instead of like, you know, confirming if this is a right or wrong choice, because there's no right or wrong choice anyways. On a soul level, we're just here to basically experience things. Yeah, I just thought about this whole easiness that you bring in. You talk about how your mom wanted less suffering for you, wanted ease of life, but somehow you kind of get on the path of like, facing difficulties with this easiness in your own way. And there's like trust in that as well. And so as a way to raise your own daughter, you mentioned that she's her own being. She has her own blueprint. And that's such a beautiful way to see a child. Because I do remember when I grew up, my mom had a lot of dreams and expectations for me. She wanted to be a dancer. She went to dance classes. She wanted to play piano. So she, basically pay a lot of money to get me to learn piano. And I still don't remember how to play piano nowadays. So I feel like I lived my mother's dream for her. And even working in corporate, like making a lot of money. And I feel like I did that for her. And it's how important it is to like, I feel like for women to see that, I don't know if separation is the right word, but there is some separation, but there's also union. I don't know, maybe it's beyond the separation and union. What do you think? Like this whole thing, because I was on a Vipassana meditation. There's a woman who was pregnant, and I was like talking to her. She said, like I can feel the child moving in my belly, but I also feel like she's not part of me. She's herself. So how do you describe this relationship, a mother has with a daughter in a way that's grounded in love?
Mm. One of my philosophies for motherhood is to raise my daughter knowing who she is. Because I feel like for myself and for a lot of women of our generation, we lost touch with who we are because of
Yes.
what was imposed on us by our parents, about society. And
Yeah.
I really want her to know who she is. And right now she's 4. So at this age, it's really knowing what is she like? What is she not like? What is she interested in? Instead of me, signing her up for all these extracurricular activities and classes, it's really asking her, like, what do you like? What are you interested in? Right? I let her choose her own outfits. I really tune into her in terms of like our schedule, what we're going to do for the day or the weekend. I ask for her input, like, what do you think about this? And I really want her to stay connected to her own sense of self, and what her voice is and what her preferences are and what feels good to her. And I see that my role as a mother is really nurturing her own knowing of that and nurturing her expression. I think that when we're in a relationship, whether that's a relationship with our child or relationship with a partner or even with friends, it's so important to know who we are, right?
Yeah.
To know, like, this is who I am and I'm happy with myself, right? I feel to a degree really complete with myself and able to meet my needs and support myself so that when we come together, we can create something, right? We can create like a whole other energy that couldn't be created with just one individual. And I see that with my child. I see, even though I am in the role of a mother, I really honor her as, her being. And that when we come together, we're really creating our experience together. And with my partner, in our relationship, I see that it's not like what I want for the relationship, but it's also in consideration of what does he want? And do we have a shared vision for things? And are we finding a way to create something together for this union and for this family that really honors our individuality and what we see for this greater energetic union for that is from us coming together. Right. And so
Mm.
this kind of gets out of a dynamic that I think people can fall into of the power play, right? The give
Yes.
and the take, the keeping tally of things, the
Yes.
blame. It totally just like gets out of that, and it puts responsibility and accountability on the individual and then how
Mhm.
you show up to your union.
Right. Yeah. And controlling, I realize how sometimes women can show up as a way of like, my way is the right way. You need to follow my way. And otherwise it's not gonna work. And then or the other way around. And so in your way of saying this is almost like the word come to me that's like sovereignty or like, this we're our own being. And then in friendship too, because if we know who we are, we're I think we're more respectful of who our friends might be or might show up in a way, and then have this set of eyes that we can appreciate their own beauty in a way too. Um, I just feel like friendship in women, it's kind of interesting. I just start to think about my high school, middle school, in the teenager women, days. Women can really have this very closeness, like, we tell each other our closest secrets, or we can get into a dynamic where like jealous of each other. Um, I wonder like how, if you ever feel that sense of like, oh, I'm jealous of this person, or if that energy ever come up. I'm asking this because that conversation come up so often lately. Um, Between me and my friends, sometimes even like my husband and I were watching White Lotus, the new season, and there's three women, and you're laughing, probably you watch it too. The three women are just like gossiping each other. They're friends, they love each other. But that I feel like that's very specific, unique for women. What's your take on that? Like this whole jealous dynamic women among women?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've experienced a lot of that in my prior work life, my prior
Mhm.
friendships. I feel like through my life, my friends have gone through a lot of different iterations because of my own growth. And I see that for a lot of women, we've lost touch with our own power, and we've lost knowing of what our own journey is. So we compare, to other people. We compare to other women. But when you really know yourself and you know this is the game that is of my lifetime, you know that you are in your unique game. And the game that someone else is playing for their lifetime is totally different. And so when you're focused on what you know your challenges and your lessons are for your own spirit and how that materializes in the world, you don't compare to others, and you can start to interpret things differently. So say you see someone doing something that you admire, right? You're like, wow, that really impresses me. Rather than get jealous about it, you can see that, oh, maybe that's a reflection of something within me that I'm not giving enough attention to, right? Something that I am really passionate about that I'm not devoting time to, or something that I see this person expressing so freely, but yet I am afraid to express. You see your own feelings as more information about yourself instead of stories or judgments or opinions about other people, right?
Mm.
Um, and I think that it really comes from us coming back to our own power, right? Of that we have that power to really create our lives instead of having it be that like one sum game where someone has to win and someone has to lose. I think that's very much the conditioning that we absorbed from this masculine capitalistic environment that is not truth.
Yeah. The whole thing about bringing the attention back to ourselves, it's important to reflect, especially when we're reacting to certain things internally. And I do remember the conversation you and I had about, that I was trying to figure out my relationship back then, like, and I was like pulling all my attention on my husband. Is he a narcissist? Is he doing this? Is he cheating? Is he doing all that stuff? And you're like, Like, I think you shared that a lot of books and, resources nowadays are teaching us to put attention on another person and make a decision from there. What you told me was to pull the attention back to myself, and then I realized that changed how I see my relationship. Because when I pull my attention back to myself, I start to see there are times I can behave pretty narcissistic. Like, I don't even know how to say that word right. Like, like I can be pretty selfish in a way. So I guess we're really mirror for each other. Whatever we see other people, it's inside of ourselves in a way. Like you're saying, if someone is doing something or showing up in a way that activate something within us. Maybe there's something for us to explore internally. I just feel like it's such a beautiful way to live. Then we're not afraid of being reactive, because I'm like, okay, there's a signal for us. One of my spiritual teacher, he said, he's older now. He's like, there is a certain age when he was like 70 years old. He said, I just want to go out and try to find someone who can act, like activate something within me, trigger me. Cause I just, it's so fun, what's there inside of me. This is the first person I saw who can actually deal with a trigger in such a playful way. Speaking of masculine and feminine energy, I would love to like hear your perspectives on those energies, especially maybe, since you also practice Chinese medicines, and I know there's also in Taoism as well. I've read so many books about those energies, and then I'm curious about your take on those energies.
I think everybody has both masculine and feminine energy within them, no matter what gender you are. And the balance of the masculine and feminine energies, just like the balance of yin and yang, the balance of the elements, it is different for each person, and it can also shift through your life. So it's kind of tuning into yourself of what is supporting me in feeling the most balance. And when we have most balance, we feel the most health and harmony and radiance, right? So I think in relationship, how do we take accountability for our own balance of feminine and masculine instead of having to outsource that to our partner? Right? I think very oftentimes like we can get caught in a dynamic when we're like out of touch with maybe the feminine parts of us. So we want our partner to express his emotions more, right? For example, right? And so it kind of comes back to letting the relationship be a mirror, because it's a dynamic. And we have, this term in Chinese culture, yun fen, right? Like something being destined to be. And I really believe that, there is a greater design to all of our encounters, all of our relationships, all our interactions, right? There's a greater design to why we happen to meet this person, or why we end up being in a close relationship with this person, whether that's our partner or our mother or our boss, right? Yeah. And so how can we kind of like see beneath the surface level to understand, why is my soul destined for this encounter? What can I learn from this? Right? Particularly when we have those dynamics of like, there's something I don't like about it, but there's also not enough for me to just walk away with peace, right? I still want to like stay in it in some way. So there's something there, right, for us to kind of reflect deeper on and to understand. And very oftentimes that bond of love, whether it's through relationship or through our parent, is kind of like what keeps us there to investigate further about, what is the lesson here? Because if that bond wasn't there, we'd be like, peace out. This is too hard.
That's true.
I'm going to go do something more fun. But because that bond is there, because that deeper love is there, is that connection that keeps us engaged up to understanding, okay, what can my soul learn from this? And I always find that it's that feeling when we tune in, right? When we tune into a struggle, a challenge that we might have in a relationship, is it all in the mind? Is it in the ego? Is it in our reactivity and our feeling of like defensiveness, having to fight? Or is that feeling of softening and dropping into the heart of like, what do I feel? What do I really feel that I deeply wish for and desire of this relationship? What is the pain that I feel? Right? That is my experience, right? What is my feeling? What is my honest communication, right? And often that is very different, right?
Yeah.
Of a feeling than when we're in a different mode. Yeah.
Yeah. It, hmm. The feeling that you talk about, in partially, you have cultivated this like trust in your own feeling. Many women might not have it. I mean, if you asked me, oh, Shah, how do you feel? Years back, I would struggle, how do I feel? I don't know. I probably will tell you all the thoughts I have in my mind. A lot of the thoughts are grounded in probably early childhood traumatic experiences. How do you discern whether this is my true feeling or something that I needed to dissolve for me to see the truth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the simple notion of feeling your feelings is
Mm.
a skill that many of us were not brought up with, we were not raised with, but it's something that we can learn and something that we can practice and get better at. I often recommend a morning grounding practice where before they start interacting with the external world, like
Mm.
checking their emails, reading the news, talking to other people, they check in with their self and get a sense of how am I feeling this morning? Right? Physically, do I feel rested or do I feel tired? Is there a part of my body that is wanting some attention? How are my thoughts? What's the quality of my thoughts? How are my emotions? Just that moment to tune inward, because we oftentimes, have these packed schedules where we're going about our day with our focus external. So we have to bring that focus back internal first and start to
Mhm.
notice, right? Notice the subtleties of feeling. And the more that we do that, the better we get at it. We can start to recognize like, oh, when I feel anger, it feels this way in my body,
Mm.
right? Because for different people, the emotions, they may feel slightly different. It's unique to the person. So you start to know like, oh, when I feel anger, my body gives me signs. I feel tense in my shoulders. I feel more stiff. I feel some heat rise to my head. Or, oh, when I'm feeling some grief, that can be underneath anger. Oh, I feel like I'm like caved in. I feel like sunken, right? I feel sometimes it helps to have like an image or a color associated with it to sort of like get more vivid knowing of what is the feeling within, right? And the more we do that, it becomes easier to get in touch with, right? So that we don't have to rely on thinking, what am I feeling? But actually feeling what is the feeling in the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. That's a good practice to have. Um, I always ask this question in every single episode. I'm curious your thoughts on this. What do you think makes us human being?
The ability to feel. I think that the wisdom that comes through the body, through our senses, and through our heart is what makes us human.
Mm.
It enables us to pick up on information that is beyond what we know intellectually. And it allows us to tune into the greater fabric of our existence, as we're connected to the people around us, the people that we know, the land and the place that we're in, the other living things, the plants, the animals that are in our surroundings and our awareness. It enables us to tune into how we're interconnected with the rest of life.
Yeah, there's some depth to it, not just flat. It looks like if we can feel and then we dive a little bit deeper in our inner landscape, because we kind of walk on the same path every day. But if we
Mm-hmm.
tune into our feeling, um, every moment, every single walk, even on the same path, can be different. That's a beautiful way to live. And I was just imagining I walk my dog every day, I smell the same rose, but it smells different every single day.
When you start to tune in to that level, that is where so many synchronicities and miracles can happen. It's that feeling of like you think about someone and then you look at your phone and you get a text message
Yes.
from them, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Or for me, I work a lot with plants and herbs and flowers. And sometimes I'll be
Mhm.
going through something and then I'll look and I'll be like, oh, there's that flower right there or that herb right there, reminding me of something, right? Or, you get in touch with something that is at your heart desire, and your vision that really benefits not just yourself, but your community, your family, and you receive a blessing, right? You encounter that person, that opportunity that manifests it. I
Yeah.
think that is that's the level when we kind of drop into what is at our heart, right? And this
Mhm.
current of life energy that flows through all of us and connects all of us is something that, can't be fully understood and it can't be mechanically replaced. It's something that makes us uniquely human.
Yeah, and this is in Taoism. They say that this is a Tao that we cannot even talk about. When we talk about it, the truth, it kind of dissolve because you have to experience, you have to have the direct experiences to really get it. And um, like when I was on a workshop called Ikigai workshop lately, and there's a new friend I met, and then he looked at me, he's like, "Sha, you reminds me of Impress in the Oracle card." I would have never thought of myself as Impress, but when he said that, the first person come to my mind it was you. And you're surrounded by flowers, this abundance, and not just money, but the abundance in all ways, and creativity, and like nurturing. And and I was like, okay, that's like the aha moment I had. I was like, okay, that's the reason why I wrote down your name in my whole role model, list, because that's what I wanted to step into. I didn't want to be this person, fighting through everything and feel so exhausted and wounded in the corporate. Um, but I want to be like this version of myself. To your point, like that's so true to me. Like this is my pure, true expression of life on this earth. This lifetime. Um, the whole way of living, I think there's certain, I don't know. It's like fun. It's fun to encounter each moment. There's less fear. I feel like when we bring in that subtlety to each moment. For women, like maybe younger women who are listening, like what would a one question you would um, invite them or encourage them to ask themselves?
I think at any point in your life and through regular points in your life, it's worthwhile to reflect on what do I deeply desire? And just notice if that is different than what you're going after, how you're spending your time and your energy and your money and your resources. And get that clear knowing of what it is that you deeply desire, not just from an intellectual standpoint of knowing the words, but a feeling of that desire, right? Like when you think about that, what you desire, what is the feeling in your body of that? And I think oftentimes that can give profound clarity to help, align and orient, life.
Yeah. Wow. What do you desire in this phase of your life?
A lot of my intention these days is cultivating peace. I think that in this world, we see a lot of discord, um, a lot of conflict, a lot of separation. And I think that if we want to see, peace in the world, it really begins within ourselves. Like how do we cultivate peace within ourselves and our families, with the land in our communities, and it extends outwards. But we have to really get to know what is peace, right? So I think for me, kind of like I always notice what supports me in feeling that peace, right? And in what ways can I help cultivate that, with the people I'm around and the places that I'm around. It makes me really sad these days when, people get caught in their opinions or their views, or their judgments, and they lose touch with their humanity, right? And I think that when we first come to peace, and still hold that, opinion, the way we interact with other human beings is a lot different. Yeah.
As you're talking, I was trying to feel what does peace feel in my body. It's just so soft. It's so soft. I have a hope though, I feel like we're all going through a tower moment where like, things are kind of hitting its edge. I do have a hope because I feel like once people see how this is not working for us, and I hope we can start to make changes, and then we can, turn inward and see how we can do things ourselves to change things. Because it's oftentimes people are like, oh, so and so is not doing things right. It's very like, similar to our conversation on relationship and partnership. It's like people are just judging how other people are not making the right decision, but how can we bring in more peace to ourselves, our heart, and radiating from inside out? And think that's what I learned from you as well. Like this whole beauty, it's not just like, we wearing makeup or dressing a certain way, but it's like that beauty we cultivate from inside out, and then we kind of extend that to our friends and community and family members.
Yeah, I find that it's always more powerful when things are first cultivated on an energetic level, right? Like if you're, calling for things, if you're fighting for a certain cause, if you're arguing, that is still at the vibration of disharmony, right? And harm, right? And discord. So it's really difficult for either side to experience what you're saying that you want to experience if you're not actually tuning into what that possibility is, right? And I think this is where the courageous practice comes, right? Like, how do you allow yourself to feel something and tune into the vision of something being possible before you're actually seeing it in reality before you? And that is how you tune into your power as a creative human being. We have that ability to generate a frequency within us of feeling, to tune into a vision, and then make that possible, make that appear in our reality. And it really comes with tapping into our power, instead of feeling disempowered, like someone's doing this to me, the system is doing this to me, I don't have a choice in this, right? That's an illusion, and we have to break out of that and come into, okay, where is that tiny small place where I might have sovereignty in this, and I might have choice in this, and I might have power to shift the relational dynamics that are around me. Yeah.
It reminds me of the conversation I had with this new friend I talk about, because he was all very into oracle and tarot cards. He talked about how like before Empress is a high priestess, and high priestess is like this feminine archetype, like it's eyes closed, no facial expression, turning inward. It's like once you get to that place, and then you can start to bring in your vision to the world. Then because the life you envision is grounded into your inner knowing, this is what I truly desire, what I really wanted, and not because so and so tell you need to make $1 billion, buy a boat, a house, whatever. And there comes a very strong foundation and of knowing who you are and what you're here for. And in this whole thing, you talk about your deep feeler. I always had this fear of like, oh God, I feel so much. If I go to the office, I feel everyone's emotions. I just don't want to be there. And then as we're talking, I start to reflect, I do have a lot of fear in feeling other people's emotions. And sometimes I feel burned by other people's, intense emotions. But then what if I can honor it? What if I can cultivate a different relationship to my sensitivities? Perhaps that'll change how I show up to people. I don't have to hide anymore,
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're alluding to is developing tools for energetic boundaries and discernment.
Yes,
right?
yes.
I think what happens with a lot of people who are highly sensitive or who feel a lot or perceive a lot is they don't quite know what to do with that information and maybe even take it on and absorb it, right?
Yes.
And, my daughter is highly sensitive. So, being a highly sensitive person myself, I'm already teaching her tools of like, how do you work with this? Right? Because just because you have the ability to perceive something doesn't mean that you have to take on the weight of that.
Yes.
And, this is like a whole other conversation.
It's so important. I think just saying it loud, that's important for people to hear it, myself included. Sometimes if I feel someone is sad, I feel this like tendency to just help this person to feel peace or like a different way. But like you're saying, sometimes it's not my responsibility. It's kind of just let it be, allow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole other conversation, but I feel that for people who feel a lot, especially, getting more knowing of your own feeling is essential, right? Because to be able to disentangle from other people's energy, you have to first know what your own energy is and have the capacity to strengthen your own field to not be so easily thrown off by other people. And we can kind of like become too focused on what we're perceiving, about the people and place around us through our senses and kind of lose touch of ourselves. So that practice, for example, of grounding is one of the ways to sort of like shift, our ability to work with the superpowers.
Yes. Yes. I love that because we're human beings. We're supposed to be in communion with each other, and we cannot hide from each other just because we fear, certain things that we don't want to feel. Which, to your point, that's what makes us human beings. So
energetic hygiene and energetic sovereignty are essential, and I think that these are things that people don't teach in school.
Right.
And oftentimes people don't learn it, when they're growing up. So, many people are having to learn that now. And thankfully, there are so many tools and techniques of working with a subtle energy body. And that's why I love my work so much.
Share more about what you do. I know you do not just practice Chinese medicine, you're also holding spaces for events and everything, right?
Yeah, I have a wellness center, Luminae Wellness, that's in Berkeley on the border of Kensington, where I practice acupuncture, mostly focused on women's health and emotional alchemy. And then I have different practitioners in the space who offer massage, traditional body work, sound healing, women's gatherings, all kind of really awesome events. So luminawellness.com on Instagram. I'm Luminae Wellness, and then we have another page for this space, the Luminae space. But those are the best ways to connect with me, connect to my work, connect with the community. And yeah, there's so many amazing practitioners and modalities and support available for people who really want to shift their health or shift the way they go about their life.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's important to receive. Like our time comes to the end. Thank you so much for taking this an hour and chat with me. I am so grateful for you on the personal level and then also like spiritual level.
So thank you for having me here. It was lovely to chat today.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe and share the show with your colleagues and friends. I'll see you next week.